as we got into March, the deep state in France really started cranking up its engines. Now, will the deep state win? That's up to the French people, but since the French elections is a persistent requirement from you all, let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Alright, since my last video on French politics, published on February the 18th, a few things have happened. For starters, they finally settled on a number on François Fillon. 831,000 euros and some change is allegedly the fraud he committed. An allegation which for now amounts to speculation by the satire magazine Le Canard Enchaîné. Speaking of which, someone commented on the previous video that I got the wrong canard, so I doubled and triple and quadruple checked and re-listened to my old video. It turns out that I did get the correct magazine. Actually, that would have been quite embarrassing if I had gotten that part wrong. But anyway, I do take these things seriously, so I would appreciate if I'm not sent chasing wild ghosts. Merci beaucoup. Now, since then, the police performed a home search on François Fillon looking for evidence for that grand corruption. They most likely found nothing, because if they had found anything, it would have been all over the French press by now, and everyone knows it. And everyone being ever so slightly aware of how French politics works also already knows this. The police have nothing. This is a character assassination operation, nothing more and nothing less. But again, as I said in the previous video on this topic, even if 100% of the allegations turn out to be true, all it would show would be that Fillon is willing to underpay his staff even when his staff is his wife. I mean, really, the amount alleged over that many years is really laughable, which is why I'm not willing to seriously consider the case and the flimsy story, because it is simply not really plausible. In any event, the longer this thing drags on, the longer Fillon will be busy quelling rebellions in his own party rather than campaigning. And perhaps that is the point, to exhaust him on nonsense. And it could actually work as a strategy. Meanwhile, the establishment conservatives in the Republican Party are still trying to change the result of the primaries and superimpose someone else, this time Alain Juppé, for the Republican ticket. And there is quite a lot of support, at least apparently, for such a move. Now, the big reason I don't have much credence to give to the claims of sanctimonious moralists who complain that, oh, maybe it isn't a big deal but still shows questionable morality on the part of Fillon, is because those exact same people want to superimpose Alain Juppé. Incidentally, Alain Juppé is a convicted criminal. His crime? Financial irregularities, convicted in 2004. So the also-concerned for morality in public office establishment conservatives want to replace Fillon, who is suspected of financial irregularities, in a story that doesn't even make much sense and for which evidence is scarcer than Ming Dynasty furniture. They want to replace him with someone who has actually been convicted of that crime. Give me a break. This isn't a campaign for sound morals in public office. It's the establishment conservatives colluding with the socialist regime to sideline Fillon. That is what this is. Meanwhile, the powers that be are also busy making a martyr out of Marine Le Pen. It's almost like these idiots want her to win, really. The European Parliament suddenly worked like clockwork when it came to lifting Le Pen's immunity because some prosecutor from Nanterre requested it. It's been amongst the fastest delivered response from the European Parliament in the last 10 years for sure, possibly even longer. Usually such requests needs months on end, but for some bizarre reason the parliamentarians found the strength to work to deliver in no time for the request by the suburban prosecutor. And by the way, suburban here is not an insult. Nanterre is a suburb of Paris. It's legally a village, really, although it's one of the very nice parts of the Paris region. Anyway, not that I care if I insult suburban French prosecutors. So, why did they require Le Pen's immunity be lifted? Well, they required this in order to prosecute her for publishing violent images. Apparently, she broke some bullshit law that should not even exist in a sane country to begin with when she tweeted back in December 2015 several public images and videos depicting the savagery of the Islamic State. Yeah, really, that's all she did. Practically speaking, considering that she was acquitted of much worse 4 years ago when she compared Muslim public praying with Nazi invaders, an apt comparison if you ask me, there is no real chance of her being convicted. But that's the point here. The point is not to secure a conviction. The punishment is the process. The point is to throw more mud at Marine Le Pen. Now, out of all this noise, the winner is, of course, the establishment's candidate, Emmanuel Macron. Now, I described him in detail in the February the 18th video, so those who didn't see that one should check it out because I won't go again into why Macron is basically François Hollande with a smiley face and even more open borders. The last polls I've seen put Macron at 24%, Fillon at 20%, and Le Pen at 25.5%. So basically, Le Pen lost half of a percent, Fillon lost 2%, and Macron gained 2.5% compared to the last time I spoke on this topic on the channel. Now, how convenient is that? One poll made by the Odoxa polling company, link in the low bar, conducted on March the 1st and March the 2nd, this poll also included Alain Juppé as a testing option. In that scenario, they claim Juppé would be the first with 26.5%, Macron would come second with 25%, and Le Pen a distant third with 24%. Now, quite frankly, I have serious doubts about this. Alain Juppé is simply not that popular. The idea that he would beat both Macron and Le Pen in the first round alone just strikes me as absurd. So yeah, that's how things are supposed to stand right now. Now, I don't know what I can say about this really. I think Fillon should stick to his guns and not bow down to pressure. Meanwhile, the troops on the ground fighting for hearts and minds, some of them watching this channel, should reach out to the Alain Juppé fans and ask them the thing that I just said earlier. Seriously, you guys want to kick off Fillon because some satire paper said he's corrupt and replace him with an actually corrupt chap that has been convicted in a court of law of such. Really? Come on. Basically, what I'm saying here is to turn the narrative against them. As for Macron's fans, I wouldn't bother too much. Basically, Macron is supported at this moment by all the far-left idealists, plus what's left of the old socialist base. The rest of it is, for now, with Jean-Luc Mélenchon, as Frenchmen, I'm sure, already do know. For everyone else, think of Jean-Luc Mélenchon as a slightly younger, slightly smarter, and also far more radical and militant Bernie Sanders. In fact, Jean-Luc Mélenchon might actually be to the left of Jeremy Corbyn too. I say might because I haven't run the full comparison yet, since Jean-Luc Mélenchon will never be president, so I don't exactly have to care what this Moroccan loon thinks. Anyway. The deep state in France is clearly scared at the possibility of what would have otherwise been the natural progression, namely a final between Le Pen and Fillon, in which Fillon would have won by adopting some of Le Pen's rhetoric on Muslims, but also exposing her blatant economic illiteracy. France would benefit tremendously from such a campaign. More Frenchmen would be red-pilled on the ills of economic socialism, more establishment conservatives would be red-pilled on the evils of Islam, and basically, overall, a good win for sanity. But the deep state doesn't want that. And they made it abundantly clear in the last 4 or 5 days when they swept both top candidates in force and to forcibly make room for Macron. Now, will this shtick last? I don't know, maybe. It really does depend on how much energy are French conservatives willing to put into agitprop and also how skilled Fillon is in keeping the party in line. Now, given his experience, I actually think he can handle this. Pundits, as usual, are chasing ghosts. I saw a few articles claiming that Fillon's fate hangs on some 1 or 2 rallies scheduled last weekend. Give me a break. The first round of elections is 6 weeks from now. Meanwhile, information changes in a matter of hours and sometimes in a matter of minutes. It could literally be the case that by the time I'm done editing this video and upload it on YouTube, new things would have already emerged. For instance, several hours before I started recording this, Alain Juppé came out to the press and say he won't try to replace Fillon on top of the Republican ticket. Is he sincere? I don't know, but I sure do hope so. So to claim that Fillon is finished because of some rally almost 2 months before the first round, that's something that only establishment pundits can believe. Now, unless the Republicans succeed in their pathetic and morally reprehensible attempt to replace Fillon with Alain Juppé or someone else, I still think the grand final will be between Marine Le Pen and François Fillon. If the Republicans succeed in their coup and put Alain Juppé or someone else on top of the ticket, then the election ceases to be worth following. Sanity would have lost before the first ballot will have been cast. And sadly, I'm not joking. I mean, really. Alain Juppé is, at the end of the day, an old fool. Le Pen is economically illiterate and funded by the Kremlin, and Macron is also economically illiterate and an open borders fanatic. It doesn't matter who wins in such a scenario. France loses. I don't want to say this out loud yet, but really, the French Republicans really need a tea party of their own, and the potential is already there, as evidenced by the rise of Fillon almost out of nowhere. I mean, he wasn't even considered a distant possibility at the onset of the primaries. In any event, should such a scenario materialize, the focus of French conservatives should be moved to the general elections or the legislative elections that are due to take place in June. Those elections become even more important if Macron or Le Pen wins. France will need a parliament hostile to President Le Pen or President Macron. Gridlock is always preferable to having unhinged economic illiterates run amok. I mean, you had that with President Hollande for a while, and it went so well that François Hollande now has an approval rating of 4%. I mean, just saying. Anyway, we'll see what happens. I'll follow this story to its end either way, but the takeaway in this video is this: don't read too much into the headlines. This is more or less normal considering the times we live in, with the deep state working much more overtly than in previous decades, and with anti-establishmentarian candidates being much more normative than in previous decades. Yeah, practical politics is tough and it is hard. And while we can afford for a while to ignore or to brush aside the practical politics because there's so many cultural battles to fight, this stuff still matters. Because in the end, the government won't fix itself and most definitely will not elect smaller state people for itself in order to shrink itself. Just saying. And with all of that being said, thank you for watching, thank you for your continuous and generous support, and I'll see you around on Freedom Alternative.